John Dickerson, join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to a special edition of America Decides. We are following a historic development. Donald Trump has become the first former U.S. president to be convicted of felony crimes. A 12-person jury in New York City found the former president guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records. They agreed with the prosecution that Trump falsified checks and records in order to prevent the public from learning about an alleged sexual encounter with adult film star Stormy Daniels. Former President Trump is scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th. Errol Barnett and Katrina Kaufman have been covering all of this inside and outside the courthouse for us all week. Thank you both for being here on this historic day. Errol, I want to start with you. Can you just walk us through what happened in that courtroom as the verdict was handed down?
Caitlin, it was only 11 hours of deliberation it took for these 12 New Yorkers to come to this unanimous decision. Today, inside the courtroom, there was a bizarre moment where, as we approached 4:30 p.m., the judge, Merchant, actually indicated that the jury may be dismissed for the day as people started to pack up. And then moments later, it became clear that there was another note from the jury, and that note was the verdict. The mood in the room shifted. Security started to get a bit more animated and telling people to be in place. And then Donald Trump had to be in the courtroom as the jury was returned to the courtroom, and the judge asked the foreperson if there had been a verdict, and if they were unanimous, that he affirmed that. And then one by one, the foreperson had to read the verdict on each of the 34 counts. So you can imagine the silence, the rapt attention in the room as again and again the foreperson said guilty, guilty, guilty. Donald Trump looking at each of these jurors, who none of them looked in his direction, as they confirmed by the judge that these were in fact their decisions, their unanimous decision, the historic decision to hold a former president accountable and effectively make him a felon. So that was the moment inside the courthouse. Outside, there was audible cheers from anti-Trump demonstrators who actually filled the street behind us a short time ago by the dozens as they tried to protest outside of the former president's motorcade. They were also joined by some pro-Trump demonstrators as well, which really kind of capped what has been 6 weeks of an intense trial and more than 20 witnesses and hundreds of pieces of evidence, which ultimately came down to 12 of Donald Trump's peers who have now decided his legal fate.
Yeah, Errol, and as you mentioned, this has been going on for 6 weeks, and we have had no cameras in the courtroom. There have not been any cameras allowed, so we have relied on your and Katrina and all of our colleagues reporting from inside the room to color that picture for us, which has been so valuable. And we actually heard from the former president, and as he was leaving court, Katrina, what did he say?
So he told reporters that the real verdict will come on November 5th when the election takes place. And he also reiterated that this is a corrupt judge and a rigged prosecution. He's already sent out a fundraising email and text proclaiming himself a political prisoner after being convicted in this trial. And it's hard to even convey. I was sitting right there in the courtroom when he walked out, and just the deep, deep worry on his face as he left that courtroom today. As the charges were being read, for a little bit, he even just sat there and closed his eyes before, as Errol was saying, looking at each juror as they validated that they were finding him guilty on all of these 34 charges.
And we understand, Errol, that Trump's legal team is going to appeal this decision. But what are the next steps in this case?
Yes, and you're seeing on your screen the actual charging sheet that each of the jurors had to work with to get to this unanimous decision. It is quite jarring when you see that key document right there. Well, we know, I mean, every step of the way, Donald Trump's defense team had pushed for a mistrial. They were not successful. If you remember, there were a number of gag orders placed on Trump, and ultimately he decided not to testify in his own defense, and the jury was told not to hold that against him. It's not a sign of guilt that everyone under the eyes of the law has that Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. So now we know that as Donald Trump exited after he crossed Katrina, who was in the main courtroom during that historic moment, he said that this was a disgrace. And he now is phrasing this as if he's a political prisoner. Of course, he was free to leave. And his campaign is also trying to fundraise off of this. Sentencing won't take place for a number of weeks. Judge Merchan has the discretion now to either keep that on the calendar as he made a date today, or to delay that during Trump's appeal. And a lot of our legal analysts and experts have suggested that a prison sentence is unlikely because this would be a first-time offense for Mr. Trump. He's elderly, he's a former president, so that gives him a distinguished kind of status in the eyes of the law. And so really the fact that he has been convicted on all 34 counts and is a felon is the headline and is stark enough. It's unlikely he will face jail time, but he is turning this now into his rallying call and campaign message.
Yeah, and Errol, it's fascinating because that sentencing date that the judge has laid out, at least at this point, is scheduled for July 11th, and that's just 4 days before the start of the Republican convention in which Donald Trump will be officially nominated as his party's nominee. Katrina, you've been covering this case as a reporter for us, but you are also an attorney. So I'm curious, how you are seeing how this might impact his future criminal trials.
I mean, this particular verdict doesn't actually impact the other trials, but I think it is a very powerful moment. Donald Trump is someone who has always said he could, shoot someone on the street on Fifth Avenue and not be held criminally accountable. We're also still waiting for the determination by the Supreme Court whether he has presidential immunity regarding his D.C. election interference trial. And in that trial as well, they're trying to claim that essentially as president, you can get away with anything. And today proved that that is not true. Donald Trump is being held accountable, criminally charged. He is now going to be a convicted felon. And it also feels powerful. We're standing right by the courthouse where he was found guilty in the New York civil fraud case this fall, and also just down the street from where he also lost a case against E. Jean Carroll just a few months ago and was hurt $91 million, the state $500 million. He now could potentially face prison time. It is unlikely, but an attorney, Norm Eisen, did an interesting study, an analysis of similar cases to this with this falsification of business records charge where it was elevated to a felony. And he found that in 1 out of 10 cases, they actually were given a prison sentence as a first-time offender. So it is on the table. I do think that Judge Juan Merchan has been very sensitive to the fact that Trump is a former president, a potential future president, and there's just no way that that political impact can't come into play as well. But another thing to account for is that when sentencing happens, sometimes things like remorse come into play. And Donald Trump has in no way taken any responsibility for any of these crimes. He also had numerous gag order violations during this trial. He was held in contempt 10 times, and all of these things can weigh into that sentencing decision.
Yeah, as he exited the courtroom, it was striking to hear after he had just been found guilty on 34 counts that he declared that he was, quote, very innocent. Errol and Katrina, you have been covering this all for us for so long. We are so grateful for your reporting and giving us the scoop inside what it was like in that courtroom. Thank you. Let's get over to the White House now, where Ed O'Keefe is. I know you've been following all of this reaction from the Biden campaign. So how is President Biden reacting to this verdict, and do we expect to hear from him personally?
Caitlin, it's good to see you on what ranks as one of the more historic of historic days you and I and everyone else here has covered in recent years. But what I'm struck by is that there's been virtually no sign of the response to this verdict from here at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's in part because those outside, when the verdict was being read, didn't appear to know. The tourists that were out there, there were large groups of students, but there was no rush over here by people for or against the results that you might have expected or seen in the past. None of it. And that's partly because the president is not here today. He is at Rehoboth Beach, the Biden beach home there, the extended Biden family marking the 9th anniversary of the death of Beau Biden, who died of brain cancer 9 years ago today. This is always circled on the White House calendar as a day you don't bother the boss, that he is with his family, he is with Beau Biden's children. And so fate just delivered the verdict on this day, and it's a good reason to keep the president out of the limelight. We are not expected to hear from him in any shape or form tonight. The only comment from here at the White House came from the counsel's office, or the lawyers to the presidency, or who represent the president in legal matters when he's serving as president. And they said, quote, "We respect the rule of law and have no additional comment." A statement from the re-election campaign, a spokesman said, "In New York today, we saw that no one is above the law. Donald Trump has always mistakenly believed he would never face consequences for breaking the law for his own personal gain." And the statement reminded Americans, quote, "Convicted felon or not, Trump will be the Republican nominee for president." Whether the president, the sitting president, decides to say anything more remains to be seen, and we'll have to wait until tomorrow. He is expected to come back for at least a few hours from his family time in Rehoboth Beach for meetings and for, of all things, a meeting tomorrow afternoon with the Kansas City Chiefs to mark their Super Bowl victory. Would he say something before that? There's certainly hours in the schedule right now that would allow for it, given that perhaps saying it with the Kansas City Chiefs behind him would seem a little improper. The other thing that's happened tonight pretty quickly is vigorous fundraising by both the Trump and Biden campaigns. The moment Donald Trump was walking out of the courtroom out into that infamous hallway to address the cameras, his campaign texted and emailed a statement to supporters saying, quote, "I am a political prisoner." Moments later, the president's campaign sent out a fundraising appeal saying there's only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, at the ballot box. Our producer, Bo Erickson, noted a few moments ago that they sent another fundraising appeal just in the last hour, and it kind of goads Biden supporters along, saying, quote, "If you have been waiting for the perfect time to make your first donation to Joe Biden's reelection campaign, we're here to tell you today is the day." Not trying to fundraise on behalf of either of these campaigns, but just to sort of convey to those of you who maybe don't get these what the political implications are. And what they are is both sides are trying to rally the troops and their base of support, understanding that now there are several months of campaigning to go.
Yeah, exactly, Ed. And we saw kind of a shift in terms of campaign surrogates for Biden going to the courthouse this week, Robert De Niro and others, to kind of make a political point here. So the political fallout of all of this for both candidates remains to be seen, but we will be following all of it. Ed O'Keefe, thank you. As you mentioned, we have been covering so much history together, but this is unlike any other day. We appreciate your time in reporting. Daniel Horowitz joins me now. He's a defense attorney and partner at McLaughlin Stern Law Firm. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. So you are a former assistant district attorney in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. So I'm really curious, just given that experience, what do you make of this verdict?
I think it's a historic verdict, and it is a historic day for the Manhattan DA's office. Clearly an important case for all of the obvious reasons, but it had its challenges, and I think that the DA and his team did a masterful job in putting together a complicated case, but doing it in a way that there's a narrative that the jury could understand. A very simple story in a lot of ways, with a lot of complex moving parts. A simple story that Donald Trump is running for president. He's got news that's going to come out that's going to hurt his campaign and his chances to be president. And he conspires with David Pecker and Michael Cohen to come up with a scheme to suppress negative stories and to pay off the people who have the stories that could derail his campaign. It's a fairly simple narrative, had a lot of complex pieces to it, a lot of different kinds of evidence, documents, witnesses, tapes. It had witnesses like Michael Cohen, who by his own admission, is almost a serial liar. But he was a serial liar who was hired by Donald Trump. And that's something that the DA was able to capitalize on.
Yeah, the strategy from the prosecutors here is seems obviously to have paid off in this case. I'm curious what you make of how the jury arrived to this decision in the amount of time that it did. They started deliberations yesterday, arrived at this conclusion today. What do you make of that timeline?
So it says one thing that's very simple. This was an extraordinarily strong case. And, as the media covered this case as it unfolded with witnesses like Stormy Daniels, a porn star, Michael Cohen, a convicted felon, David Pecker, the publisher of the National Enquirer, there's Keith Davidson, porn star's lawyer. You had a lot of sort of unseemly pieces to this that in the narrow sense on the day-to-day, okay, what happened today in court? Oh, gosh, the witness said this, and there was cross-examination, and the cross-examination might have been effective. But what the DA's team did at the end of the day is, in a masterful tour de force performance, the DA brings together, Josh Steinglass, brings together all these complex pieces in a narrative that the jury, as I said a minute ago, could understand. And the fact that the jury came back so quickly speaks to the strength of the case.
All right, Daniel Horowitz, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. And we are going to go to Robert Costa now, who joins us also from outside the courthouse. Bob, you have been covering this since the very beginning. It has been a long trial, but this is not just a criminal conviction. This now goes into the political sphere and the fallout to come from this. Donald Trump is running for president. How is this going to affect him on the campaign trail? I mean, we saw him come out today and declare that he, in his words, is a very innocent man, declaring this as a rigged system. How do we expect him to move on politically?
Well, he's not going to move on politically. I've been speaking to sources close to former President Trump tonight, and it's evident that this is a seismic political and legal moment for Trump. Legally, he is going to begin the appeals process very soon and start to fight this in the courts. At the same time, he is going to use this conviction, 34 felony counts, to rally his base and to say to the Republican Party that, in his view, he was wrongly convicted, and he needs them to stand by him ahead of the Republican National Convention, which is just around the time he will be getting this prison sentence. This is a surreal moment for American politics and American democracy. You're going to have a presumptive Republican nominee enter the convention as a convicted felon facing possible jail time, while at the same time paying very little, if any, political cost with his own party. In fact, they're rallying to the political barricades right now on social media and on conservative media channels to say we stand with Trump. And that tells you about the summer of grievance that's ahead.
Yeah, Bob, I want to talk a little more about that, because you note, I mean, and we use this word all the time when it comes to Trump and everything that has happened and is to come, that, pretty much everything is unprecedented when it comes to Donald Trump and what he is doing here and facing here. But this is the first felony conviction of a former president. And you have been following this since the beginning. Give us a sense of, what it has been like there, what the reaction has been like to this.
The mood here in the park in Lower Manhattan for the past couple of hours has been one of almost stunned silence. There was a bit of cheers when the verdict was revealed, when the 34 guilty counts were announced inside the courthouse behind me. And then the quiet fell over the park here. This is a moment in America we haven't seen before, to use the word you chose, unprecedented, but it's also a test for the American people, the American political system. Because unlike, for example, past presidential moments where the country really saw scandal erupt, like Watergate in the 1970s, there's not a consensus now in the American political discourse about the rule of law, about the judicial system here in New York, or the justice system on a federal level. You have many Republicans aligned with Trump, believing, in their words, it's rigged, even though Trump was just tried by a jury of 12 New Yorkers, his peers. And many Democrats see Trump as a threat to democracy. Robert De Niro, the Academy Award-winning actor, I spoke to him a couple days ago. And he told me he came here because he really believes Trump is a threat to the order that was established by the Constitution and the Founding Fathers. So you have these diametrically opposed viewpoints, not just red and blue anymore. It's populism and nationalism versus almost traditional institutional thinking on a variety of fronts. And all of that is a cloud over the consequence of this trial. So this is a moment where there's uncertainty on the horizon, politically, legally, and in terms of American democracy.
Yeah, and Bob, as you are always right to remind us that we can assume nothing. So we will see what the fallout and consequences are politically in this election. Bob, we thank you very much. And congressional Republicans are already hammering this guilty verdict in Trump's criminal trial. We'll check in on Capitol Hill. You're streaming America Decides.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Republican congressional leadership has been critical of former President Donald Trump's guilty verdict. Our Scott McFarland joins us now to discuss. Scott, thank you for being here on this marathon day. So we had House Speaker Mike Johnson. Of course, he and almost all Republicans have been critical of this process. How is he reacting to this?
It just shows in the first couple of hours since the verdict that nothing seems to change the political calculus whatsoever, the trajectory on Donald Trump among his supporters. House Speaker Mike Johnson issued a statement which is symmetrical, parallel to so many other Republicans, saying the weaponization of our justice system has been a hallmark of the Biden administration, and the decision today is further evidence Democrats will stop at nothing to silence dissent and to crush their political opponents. We had several other statements from several other Republican leaders with a number of keywords, Caitlin: corrupt, rigged, weaponized, political. If that word cloud was created of the statements, you'd see those words at the center of it. Democrats leaning into the parallel argument, or the reflection of that argument, which is that this was the system working. This was citizens, the former president's peers, rendering a verdict. This was not the work of any political actors, certainly not the Biden administration.
Yeah, nobody is above the law in their words in a lot of those statements. We've seen kind of a parade of Republican allies outside the courthouse. Nearly every day he has had some kind of cohort of supporters outside the courthouse. Give us a sense of, what comes next for Republicans on Capitol Hill. Does this become part of a campaign argument? As you mentioned, they're really echoing Trump's campaign phrases.
These are Republicans who, first of all, not only synchronized their message outside the courthouse, but synchronized their clothing at one point outside the courthouse. It was a choreographed message, at least it seemed that way. But it also synchronizes with what they're doing on Capitol Hill as Republicans endeavor to continue their impeachment inquiry into President Biden, continue their investigation into Hunter Biden, and on Tuesday, called the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland for questioning before one of the Republican-led House committees, with a keen focus, we suspect, on January 6th, on the prosecutions of Donald Trump through the special counsel, and on what's going on with Hunter Biden. So you have this political tonnage they're carrying and are poised to use and dump in the coming weeks.
And as you mentioned earlier, the sentencing for this conviction could come 4 days before the Republican National Convention. What are the stakes there?
Yeah. It's a July 11th sentencing hearing, 10 in the morning in Manhattan, a July 15th launch date to the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. The former date is not set in stone. We've seen sentencing hearings moved in many cases through the years. No reason to believe this one is firm and locked. It could shift, but if it doesn't, it certainly is an appetizer to what's about to happen on a stage in Milwaukee.
Yeah, nominating a convicted felon. It will be another history-making day, to be sure. Scott McFarland, thank you very much for your time. And if Donald Trump gets prison time, he'll have his Secret Service detail backing him up. Excuse me.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered. There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
While this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor.
And welcome back to America Decides. We continue to cover this historic verdict in the former president's criminal trial out of New York. Donald Trump has been convicted on all 34 counts of falsifying business records. The former president will learn his sentence in July. Let's bring in John Dickerson, Major Garrett, and Jan Crawford. John is anchor of The Daily Report with John Dickerson and CBS News chief political analyst. Major is CBS News chief Washington correspondent, and Jan is CBS News chief legal correspondent. A lot of chiefs here. Thank you all. John, I want to start with you because we have talked all afternoon about this historic moment that we have here. But walk us through, as you do best, the real gravity of what we have just learned.
Well, in 237 years of the American presidency and 46 men who've held that job, one has never been a convicted felon. So that sets the stakes right there. I think that the real gravity that is on my mind right now is that, Donald Trump is now not just convicted, but he is also the Republican nominee, and there's an election underway, and there is a veep stakes underway, and the incentives of politics are to run down and denigrate the legal system. That's not to say that Donald Trump, like every other person, isn't allowed his chance to appeal and that there might not be grounds for appeal. But to go so far, as some of his supporters are doing, and make the groundless accusation that Joe Biden is, involved in this in some way, echoes the same kinds of baseless claims that were made after the 2020 election, which Donald Trump lost. And when those baseless claims are made that the system is rigged, people who are of a mind to operate and take things into their own hands, when that kind of prodding is given to them, they take things into their own hands. And I am concerned now about how people who should be stewards of the system, of the constitutional system, how they will react in political terms that exacerbates the violent responses that we've seen in our politics, obviously most notably on January 6th.
Yeah, Major, to that point, we have seen Donald Trump be able to evade political consequences, legal consequences up until now. Today changes that.
Today changes that in a legal context. The former president said that won't matter on November 5th because I will give my answer and my voters and supporters will give their answer and reelect me. My legal answer is a political answer. And for the better part of the weeks that this has been proceeding in New York, former president has availed himself of every opportunity to, as John said, criticize, if not denigrate, the legal system and make a political plea. I am being persecuted. I am being singled out. And many of his Republican supporters look at the judge and say there are Democratic connections there, financial and otherwise, to candidates or the prosecutors. What they haven't said, however, and all those things are true, that doesn't mean this case is illegitimately brought, but they are points of political conversation that have a legitimacy to them. But what they don't say is evidence submitted before the jurors was fraudulent. Those checks aren't made up. The checks that have Donald Trump's signature on them. And the testimony of one of his closest friends, David Pecker, who ran the National Enquirer, was emphatic. We talked about it. We launched this. This was a scheme. This was to influence the election, and I was part of it. The critics of this process are not assailing either those checks or that evidentiary pattern the prosecutors laid before the jury or the most relevant and compelling testimony about what those checks represented. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that's going to persist as we debate what this verdict does or doesn't mean. The former president and his Republican supporters will say it means that the justice system is completely unraveling. Those who support this verdict will say, wait a minute, what's the evidence say? Are you contesting the evidence? And until Republicans start actually contesting that evidence, I think they are going to have to acknowledge they are not on as firm legal footing as they might think.
And, you know, this happened in the context of a legal proceeding. As much as the former president and allies are describing this as a political theater, it was not. This is a jury of 12 people, Jan, a jury of the former president's peers. How do you imagine that they arrived at this decision? Unanimous on all counts.
And swiftly.
Yeah.
I mean, that, you know, that's, I think, can't be overstated how quick this verdict came down after they took, obviously, quite thorough looks at testimony and had instructions reread. You know, and the jurors, the judge has said that they're free to talk. So we're all going to eagerly be waiting what some jurors choose to say or not about how they did reach this verdict. I mean, it was a New York jury coming from all walks of life, as New York is. You had 2 lawyers, you had, people from a variety of jobs who get their news from a variety of sources. What you're going to see and what we've already seen from Trump and his allies is that this is a New York jury in a state that, in an area that goes overwhelmingly Democratic, and that will play well to his base and in certain swing states. And I think one of the things that, we now have this first ever conviction of a president, of a presidential candidate. He is a convicted felon, but this was just one of 4 potential trials that he could have faced. And, to that extent, yes, this is a run-of-the-mill business trial. Some people equated it to, prosecuting Al Capone on tax evasion charges, so he is convicted. But there were other cases that I thought were more, and, the timing-wise, this is the one that came up first. But, you had the classified documents case in Florida. You had the prosecution by the special counsel, Jack Smith, for the actions, which are on video and phone calls for January 6th and efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Those allegations are in some ways easier to get your hands around, to say, like, the severity of this. Right. That, yes, we can see the consequences of trying to overturn an election. Yes, classified documents need to remain classified for a reason, and it is in Florida, which is not New York, obviously. So I think you're going to see in the days ahead efforts, and we've already seen it, to undermine not only this indictment, this prosecution, this jury, this judge, and there will be people who believe that. And that goes to, I think, what John is also saying, that we're in a moment in this country where the legitimacy of our institutions has been under attack, often by Donald Trump, and people's faith in those institutions is eroding. And I think in some ways that's a very troubling moment, in addition to the specter of violence and the other things that John pointed out. That's a troubling moment for our country.
Absolutely. We have to leave it there. But John, Major, Jan, thank you for the context, the analysis, and the reporting on this historic day. We appreciate it. And this verdict could have major implications for Donald Trump's re-election bid. Our CBS News political director will have an update on where things stand and the reaction from Trump's inner circle. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS. The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going.
The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels. 100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door. This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The verdict in former President Trump's criminal trial could have a major impact on the presidential race. After the jury made its decision, Trump said, quote, "The real verdict is going to be November 5th. CBS News political director Finn Gomez joins us now for more. Finn, great to see you. This is a day unlike any other. We have been saying that all the time when it comes to Donald Trump, but this really is a day that we just haven't seen. He is the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party, and yet now is officially a convicted felon. What are you hearing from Trump's inner circle about how they're feeling about this verdict?
Hi, CHB. Yeah, so I've spoken to several people in the Trump campaign, and also close Trump allies. Their sense, my understanding from speaking with them, is that they feel that this actually will help the former president politically, that it will help him because his base is fired up. They're motivated. They feel that this is they believe the narrative that he has been saying every day at 100 Center Street down there at the courthouse, that this is a political witch hunt. They believe that narrative, but they also believe that this will boost him. They feel that this will that especially that foundational structure. If you look at his support, that coalition that makes his 2024 base support, that they will be fueled by this, that they will be going out into the polls, that they will be essentially fired up and will be very active.
And Finn, do you have a sense from them about whether this could potentially, whether they see this as not only animating their own base, which is of course going to be riled up for him, but whether it might convert anyone in the middle?
Well, we did see some polling, Caitlin, just this week that showed from NewsHour and their poll showed that actually that most people believe that this wouldn't really impact their decision on how they will vote on November 5th. However, the amount of attention, the amount of national and global attention this unprecedented conviction is getting. As you referenced, CHB, this is the first time we've ever seen a presumptive nominee, a former president, convicted in a criminal trial. And this, for those that I've spoken to who are aligned with President Biden and his campaign, they have told me that, frankly, they believe that this will help the other side, will help them politically. Well, if you look at those who will now be paying attention, perhaps let's take there's been a lot of attention on that Nikki Haley supporter that we saw, who's sort of still questioning whether they will support Trump or not. People close to the campaign, to the Biden campaign, tell me they believe that this will help them with that voter. That would help them in those 7 battleground states that we've been paying attention to, that could decide this race. And for those Biden Democrats that I've spoken to, they think this will help them pull some of those Haley voters into their camp.
Yeah, Finn, you make a really good and important point, which is that all of this has been a hypothetical. So now that it is reality, how do voters assess that? And we will be talking to a lot of them over the next several months to assess their feelings about all of this. Finn Gomez, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's go now to A.T. Smith. He's the former Deputy Director of the Secret Service. A.T., it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. So I want to talk about the possibility of jail time for the former president. Most legal analysts we've talked to have said that they really doubt that any jail time would be administered for the former president, given the circumstances. But if that were to be the case, if he was sentenced to jail, what would that look like, given that he would be under Secret Service protection?
Well, at the end of the day, the Secret Service will work through whatever the parameters are issued by the judge in order to make things work from a protective standpoint, because, under the law, President Trump is still entitled to Secret Service protection. So whether that were an incarceration scenario or house arrest or simply probation, they will work with the court officials to make sure that the security needs will be met, but at the same time that the issuance and so forth of the orders of the court will be adhered to. And I know that for a specific reason, the Secret Service did not engage in any pre-conversations, if you will, about what might happen today if incarceration were ordered. They didn't want any leaks or any sort of signal sent that would be wrong or erroneous. And I know that having said that, during the time that the gag order violations were an issue, the service did have some conversations about what if, and in that scenario, there were several things put on the table, whether it's the VIP section of Rikers or even to some degree, there's a VIP detention ward at Bellevue Hospital, or certainly, house incarceration or house arrest at Trump Tower. So there were a lot of things discussed, not in the context of this, but in the context of the gag order. But at the end of the day, and the Secret Service has put out a statement today saying that they will adhere to the orders of the judge, but at the same time, they will carry out their mission as they always do.
Yeah, and regardless of what happens with the sentencing, there must be a heightened sense of alert in terms of potential threats to the former president, especially now that he is a convicted felon.
That will take a couple of days to see, but as you can see from today's events, the NYPD enhanced their security perimeter around the courthouse very quickly because of the verdict, I think. But at the same time, the Secret Service will work with its state and local partners wherever the former president may go to make sure that the security needs are met. In terms of threat analysis and the intelligence there, it will take a day or so to discern that. Normally, events may drive the threat level up a little, but then, once those things are investigated over a matter of days, they tend to flatten out again. So we'll just have to wait and see, and the Secret Service will take a hard look at that over the next few days to see what kind of threats come in, both pro and con for that matter, to see what sort of evaluation they need to do And that plays into the enhancement of security at any venue that they may go to.
All right, we will keep an eye out for that, certainly. A.T. Smith, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And reaction to the Donald Trump verdict is still coming in. We'll talk to CBS News election law contributor David Becker about what precedent this case sets and the possibility of political violence. Stay with us.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now. We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
For the first time in American history, a former president has been found guilty in criminal court. CBS News election law contributor David Becker joins us now. David, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So we have never been here before. Talk to us about the precedent that this case sets.
Well, it's historic. As you've noted and many others have commented, we've never had a former president convicted of a felony before. We knew this was likely coming. There were multiple cases in the works. This is the first one that got there. But this could have an impact, not just on the election and how we choose our next president, but on how people respond to institutions and our democracy overall. One of the things that I'm keeping a close eye on is whether or not this might cause the minority of Americans who will believe the claims that this was rigged and this was a Biden prosecution, both of which are false, and who might be inclined to get angry because they support Donald Trump, whether this might lead to political violence over the next several months. But I'm also struck by how resilient our institutions are. This is remarkable. In our nation's history, we might never have been challenged as much as we have been since the Civil War. And yet our institutions, whether it be election officials and our election system, which have responded remarkably over the course of time, or our court system, which has responded remarkably. Scott McFarland made a great point a few hours ago about how the jurors on this trial undoubtedly knew that they would be attacked if they convicted him, much as the judge and his family had been attacked. And yet they still looked at the evidence, looked at the law, and did their duty. And our institutions, once again, have been resilient against attacks.
Yeah, and that's important to note, especially with these potential threats of political violence, especially given how Trump supporters have shown that they're willing to stand up for him. I'm curious, too, I mean, now that the former president is a convicted felon, he's also the presumptive Republican nominee. He is going to be nominated as the party's nominee in July. Can he still vote as a convicted felon?
Yeah, that's a great point. I've been getting that question a lot recently. It is undoubtedly true that he is going to be the Republican nominee. He is going to run. He can take office despite this conviction. His right to vote, he's currently a Florida voter, is going to be subject to Florida law. And what Florida law says is that if you are a convicted felon, you are subject to the laws of that state with regard to the felony conviction, in this case in New York. And in New York, you're eligible to vote so long as you are not currently incarcerated. So he is extremely unlikely, almost a 0% chance of him being incarcerated by November. So it's almost certain that he will still be eligible to vote under Florida law.
All right, that is important clarity for us, and we will wait that sentencing scheduled for July 11th, just days before the political convention for the Republicans. David Becker, as always, we thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin.
And that does it for us here today. You've been watching a special edition of America Decides. John Dickerson picks up our coverage next with the Daily Report. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why? You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis? You're not answering my question.
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean in
Did any of that make